Across the board, I think there's support required at many different levels, and we're all involved in that process. I think it needs to be supported from the individual classroom teacher as well as the push-in teacher, but it also needs to be supported with language policy as well as admissions policy. If we're not going to provide a complete package, then we cannot allow admissions of students who we're not going to support. So across the board.
Okay, well, I think first of all, the school has a responsibility to students that it admits if they are not proficient in English, or if they're, coming in at, say, grade 6 or 7 or 8, and of course at grade 9 level becomes even more important, that the school have a program, like our school does, the EAPP or the ESL perhaps in other schools, to assist students undertaking this very big challenge.
Okay, yeah, within the school, I feel it's every teacher's duty to and responsibility to support the EAPP students within our classes. It doesn't just fall on one person or on specified teachers. It's all of us. I
agree. I know the EAPP teacher is there to add insight and suggestions and have a little personal knowledge on the students, the EAL students in the classroom, but it is definitely the responsibility of all teachers.
So the first question is a difficult one, because I think it depends on the stage of learning that people are at. Ideally we want people to progress to becoming more independent in their work habits. And in terms of language support, I think the classroom teacher has a responsibility to differentiate to all the learners in the class, as the EAPP students have needs beyond the mainstream student. Then I see that EAPP teacher is offering additional support to them, but it's very much a collaborative approach and responsibility shared between the classroom teacher, the EAPP teacher, and the student.
Yeah, it's everybody's role in the school.
Everybody's role, but I would say while they're in the EAPP, it's primarily our role. But of course, when they're in your subject area classroom, then it's your role.
I think maybe one of the primary responsibilities, maybe for you, would be coordination. As a homeroom teacher, actually, I'm having to support kids with EAPP with regular stuff like getting their documents together, or getting them to the right class, or helping with communication, that sort of thing.
I think we all have responsibility to support all of our students. Our EAPP students have their own individual needs, and so it's helpful for them to have their own teachers who can help them with those needs. But when a student's in my classroom, I have responsibility to support that student, whether those needs be language needs or whether they be other.
So, okay, you know exactly what I'm going to cover. You've prepared flashcards, which, that's impressive. Not only is it a language, right, it can also be used as definitions by the other students in the class, so they're made available. Technology, so you're technologically adept, so that's wonderful too. More importantly, when I give the big tasks like we did just recently, this project that was actually very language based, because it had to cover this one world criterion, the students had to link the extraction of metals, the science of the extraction of metals, to issues, real life issues. So that sort of discussion, how can a student who is, who's new to the English language, they couldn't possibly hope to understand what's expected of them. So not only did you practice the language, but you also, I think, spent time explaining what I would be looking for.
Being a kind of specialist, I think, is to help us mainstream teachers to be able to deal with the issues that may arise with the EAPP students, because there are times when we can sort of go a little too fast or use too much technical stuff and kind of leave them behind. So the EAPP teacher is sort of there to facilitate.
Modify documentation that's sent out to the students, or assessments, or tasks that are maybe just lesson specific.
I see that they have a significant relationship with the EAPP student that goes beyond a classroom teacher, as in that they often have a one-to-one, or in my situation one-to-one, so therefore they would be more able to identify the difficulties the EAPP student is experiencing, and they can help meet these needs, bridge the gap between what the mainstream teacher is delivering and what the student is able to understand, particularly in terms of language.
I take notes. I want to find out what's going on in Mac's classes so that I'm ready with the pullout to use that information and try and see that they're up to speed. I try to help with small group activities. Like we were watching a film the other day, and I would hand to Eunice, I wrote down important points in the film, and I'd hand it to her.
Yeah, a lot of times it's team teaching. Like I might be directing the class discussion, but the EAPP teacher is certainly expected to kick in when they see a different perspective, or when they can offer something in a method or in a mode or in a way that's more easily understood by the EAPP students. I see Harry's role as to basically reinforce my role in the classroom. It's symbiotic.
The EAPP teacher is obviously on the first level teaching English language across the curriculum to their students, but also coming in to support other teachers in their teaching of the language of their curriculum. It could be supporting the student in the classroom, or supporting the teacher in developing resources, or in adapting the way that they might deliver something to make it more accessible.
It's great to have you, and I really appreciate your work. And to tell you the truth, I'm not. I like it. I don't mind it. I don't know why teachers would mind it. Really, it ultimately helps the students. So I'm not at all threatened. Maybe for some teachers, but I guess it's a personality thing. So I sort of I think I'm easygoing, and and maybe I'm at the stage of my career where I'm not really worried.
At first, I was a little bit nervous. Having another adult in the classroom is always a little intimidating, but that doesn't really bother me much. I enjoy the support. I enjoy hearing another opinion about what's coming across to the students, getting the feedback after a lesson about which vocabulary is coming across clearly, which ones need to be clarified. It's good professional development. The best benefit there is your willingness to give feedback about what you're receiving from the student point of view. I mean, you're on the receiving end, and you're able to be more critical. But you can comment on how it's coming across, and that's something that I just can't perceive with students who just won't talk unless absolutely probed.
My experience of the EAPP teachers being in there has been very, very supportive and useful for those kids who are doing the practical stuff. Sometimes we don't have enough time to prepare it. And
frustration is, of course, time, because when you're working with the EAPP students, they're on a different speed to mainstream students anyway, so you're trying to keep them up to speed. But without the extra time, it means that often you're rushing them through, and with the science teacher and the EAPP teacher, without having extra time built into the timetable for us to develop professionally together and talk through what are we going to be teaching, how are we going to teach this unit, what would you like me to do, and then also asking clarification questions to Rob, saying, I'm not a science teacher, but what does this mean? I don't understand this. How am I supposed to take this information and then convey it to my EAL students in the classroom? So time is the biggest issue for me.
Worst of all, when I think I got you for one push-in a week, and if a lab experiment fell on a non-push-in day, then sometimes the kids could be floundering. Lydia sometimes comes and gives me stuff that I've never seen before that isn't just useful for the EAPP kids, it's useful for everybody, and some really good stuff's come out, and also has helped a lot with my understanding of how I go about trying to incorporate a bit of differentiation into the class. And so perhaps unexpectedly I've come and found some stuff that you've given me that's been very, very useful indeed.
I've had a range of EAPP teachers in the classroom, and I think that individual EAPP teacher has a large impact on the benefit of having them in the classroom. For them to be successful, I think obviously there needs to be an interest in the subject and a good relationship with the student. You know, there have been drawbacks when there have been EAPP teachers who are perhaps out of their interest field or out of the age of they're teaching students that are perhaps not at age they're comfortable with, and their lack of interest and passion in the classroom is, you know, rubs off onto the students as well. So there needs to be a good relationship between the EAPP teacher and the student and the subject. But the benefits are quite extensive in terms of, I already said, bridging that gap and helping speed the process of immersing the student in a mainstream program, making them more successful.
I love having EAPP push-in support in my classroom, and I wish that it were possible for that to be provided in all classes where I have EAPP students. My experience, particularly this year, has been very positive. Frustrations when EAPP support has to be withdrawn for whatever reason. You notice the difference. For example, I have one class now who used to have the benefit of an EAPP teacher push-in support and who currently don't, and I found that the progress we're able to make has slowed down within that class.
At the 8th grade level, I think that's great. We're not so tight on time to get through material and curriculum. All of these students, even though they're not technically EAPP, all of them have more language experience than I do. They all speak multiple languages. English is rarely the first. So getting any sort of support in that way would be great. I have seen some of that benefit when the papers are marked and just, hey, could you change this vocabulary or maybe reword, you know, so I appreciate the suggestions that are coming through in that regard. If we had the opportunity to do that in the classroom, I think that would be very beneficial for everybody.
I feel very good about having another professional in here who can, you know, especially the language angle, you know, that's so important. I also liked when, you know, when that project was given to the students, I appreciated that you went ahead and put it together. And so well, you know, you even listed the vocabulary that would be very important to include in the students' presentation. And actually, it saved me time, so I really appreciate it.
And does also mean I change the way I'm doing things, which is great, you know, as far as I'm concerned. Some of the language-heavy aspects of science, where we've got big glossaries of words and stuff like that, I think it would be actually quite good to have the support of an EAPP teacher to know exactly a better way or better methods to get that across. I think the idea of that influence in the lesson is a good one.
I enjoy having the EAPP teachers contribute to the classroom because then their presence is more acknowledged and more worthwhile, rather than just having someone sit in the back of the room in more of an observation role. It makes them become more valued. It also helps shape your own practice, as most students have literacy as a weakness. Many of the teaching practices encouraged for EAPP students are good teaching practice for all students. So making the knowledge and resources available that the EAPP teachers have to all students provides a greater benefit than limiting it to the specific EAPP designated student.
The influence of an EAPP teacher, from my point of view, would do nothing but add to the quality of the instruction.
A lot of our mainstream kids could benefit from a little heavier focus on the linguistic skills that they need, you know, writing and
especially in the humanities.
Yeah.
Yeah, humanities are language rich, so we could be dealing with grammar, we could be dealing with spelling, we could be dealing with vocabulary development, and
I
that's...
was fortunate enough to take the English in the Mainstream course last year, and I learnt a lot from doing that course, but I learnt a lot more from having an EAPP teacher in my classroom working with me. I've changed the way that I teach things as a result of that, as a result of those conversations. I'm much more likely to write vocabulary on the whiteboard as I'm speaking. I'm much more likely to slow down what I'm saying and to set tasks which are language orientated tasks in my classroom as a result of collaborative conversations between myself and the EAPP teacher. And what I've noticed is that the benefits from that are not only benefits to my EAPP students, but also to all of the students in my classes. I've noticed that the language acquisition that's subject specific has really improved since I've changed the way that I do some things. And so there's been a direct professional development for me from that that's been a benefit to all of my students. You know, interestingly enough for myself, the process that I've gone through and the changes I've gone through in my teaching in the last year have made me more and more interested in teaching English myself, and I would like to be able to, if it was possible on the timetable, provide some push-in support myself and go into other classes and try to develop in that area. So it's been quite inspirational for me.
The closest thing that I have experienced has been special education support. And it was a very similar model, push and pull out. That model is the only model I'm familiar with. I like the idea of having the professional in the classroom critiquing what I'm doing and how it's supporting those students. The pull-out support has been beneficial. Students who are running long on assessments get to ask those questions. Your support has been very professional. The conversations between us about what kind of support you're providing and how much help you're giving, and just a clarification that it's vocabulary help and not content help, and just having that dialogue has really affirmed that this is a good set.
Being the push-in, pull-out teacher is a two-tier model, so not only am I in that classroom, but also I have to teach in my own classroom without the science specialist there to help me, the language and science vocabulary. So when I'm in Rob's classroom, I'm learning and I'm able to ask him questions, and so it allows me then to take that information, that knowledge, and then transfer it to my own classroom. So it's essential for the two-level model to work. Our curriculum does have the push-in, pull-out model, but that's not all that we have. Because of all the concentration on the push-in, pull-out model, people might not realise that we also run literature classes and reading and writing classes, culture classes. We have other classes that we run, and for the EAPP teacher this can be quite laborious because you might find that you actually have 11 preps or 8 preps, whereas if you're a mainstream teacher you're complaining with 5 preps. So you have to be very flexible and think on your feet the whole time. So not only are you trying to, as an EAPP teacher, trying to master something outside of your subject, but I also then have to come back into my classroom and remember I'm a language teacher, so I have to be teaching them, skills on how to break down a book and how do they write in certain genres, and so it goes on. So it's quite labour intensive to do this model, but it is the best model.
This is the only model of EAPP support I've experienced. The model is potentially very effective. I do feel it could be strengthened if better supported by a special needs program, as some students who don't have the language skills that progress through the stages with the assumption that it's special needs that is their problem, but they are being further immersed into subjects irrespective of their language ability, without perhaps risk, and the level of support is going down despite the fact that their language perhaps is not progressing.
I think one of the almost hidden advantages is that the EAPP teacher experiences the curriculum from the perspective of a student in different classes, and then when they're offering lessons, discrete EAPP lessons, they're able to use that experience and talk from direct experience of being in other classrooms and knowing what those classrooms look and feel like. I think an EAPP teacher trying to deliver that without having visited classrooms and seeing how the specific school and curriculum in that school is delivered to those students, you know, that there's a loss of connectivity, I think, there, and so it's got definite advantages for that beyond the support of the individual student in the classroom.
I think, you know, if they're hopefully to have time, you know, that both teachers are available, that would be good.
More time. Trying to coordinate the times when we have a period so that we can work together. It feels like there's often a struggle between the number of students and the number of teachers who are able to provide the specialized support. And I don't think we've found that balance as a school, and that has to be answered at the school level.
It is really important that we just take a deep breath, back off the content, and then try and find a way of marrying the content with the language at the same time. But this is not just an issue that is between the EAPP teacher and the science teacher, it's the whole school that needs to be on board and realise that it's not just a tick list of content, but we're actually teaching more than just vocabulary items or you know, just scientific terminology. It's that, of course it is, but it's so much more. If you don't resource the department, then you can't operate this program. You just can't. And so what happens is then you have all of the students being trapped in the EAPP classroom, and there's not the possibility of them being gradually released, and when they are released they don't have any support network to help them. That also means that the EAPP teacher is not able then to communicate with the mainstream teachers in the same way.
There is limited co-planning between the teachers, making that available. More either if you can designate EAPP teachers to work with specific teachers, so there's a consistent relationship, or EAPP teachers to work within a subject so that those teachers can, or that EAPP teacher is familiar with the practices of that subject, and then that EAPP teacher should become part of that department as well for department meetings. A stronger special needs support throughout the school, and also to help with EAPP teachers to help assess the students that are having greater difficulty in their program.
Common dedicated planning time.
Yeah, I think back also to the films that you see in that ESL in the mainstream, where they show this kind of perfect collaboration between the mainstream teachers and the EAPP teacher. You can see, obviously, that this is a situation where these people have had lots of time to sit down together and think about, you know, how they can work together in the classroom to support language learners, and we just
it doesn't happen. It doesn't happen off the cuff. It doesn't happen by chance. It happens by design.
I think time needs to be found for people to work together, because the reality is that if you don't have the time to do these things, they can't happen. And so for me, the most important thing that PTAS could do is provide that common meeting time. Also, it would be nice if we had more EAPP teachers, so that more push in and out support could be implemented in the school.
Well, one of the initiatives that we have, of course, is the ESL in the mainstream class. It was taught, when I took it, it was taught by somebody in the elementary school. So that provides a very different perspective. Questions that came up as far as supporting the older students, as far as relating to the level of rigor of the curriculum at the high school level, particularly when we get into the grade 11 and 12 diploma. Some of those things weren't appreciated in the same way, just as if somebody at the high school were trying to instruct a bunch of elementary teachers. Getting some additional feedback into that program from teachers at different tiers would be helpful. Staff meetings could be used to, again, clarify what is our purpose as a school, what is our mission, what is it that your department is looking for. So when we're developing a task, what are some of the things that we should try to do for the EAPP students specifically? But if we have just kind of the top 5 things to look for when making your assessment task EAPP friendly.
You guys have a couple of workshops from the EAPP department actually to remind us, because sometimes we get, caught up in the teaching, and fill us in on what are the new ideas about language acquisition. So I'd like to learn. I sort of know, because I myself, I learned English. It was my second language, right? So I sort of have a feel. I understand what the kids go through. It's great to come into your classroom and see, what you've got there, right? And what you're working on, what's on your walls and everything.
Meetings, I would say meetings, because it's one thing to deliver the information, but also it's quite another to actually have everybody engage in the information that's being delivered and understand completely. So yes, it'd be great to have a workshop, but what Rob was saying would be so much more powerful is invite mainstream teachers into our world. Often we go into the mainstream teachers' world, but this is this no-go zone that people don't come to this part of the corridor. So yes, if we actually were able to invite people in to see what we did and how we deliver our science lessons, for example, it would be one professional development to be in somebody else's classroom, to see how they teach, to try out new teaching tricks that maybe Rob's done in his science classroom. I can take that and I can use it in my own classroom.
I think the ESL and the mainstream is a very good course. The difficulty with courses like that is when you label them ESL and the mainstream, the strategies and teaching practices become pigeonholed for ESL students. And I think as a professional development measure, and if we want all mainstream teachers to take on more effective teaching strategies, we need to broaden the scope and open people's eyes that these practices are good teaching practices rather than limited to EAPP students.
And maybe an initial orientation with regard to the purpose of the department and the activities of the department and what possible services or teaching additions or benefits or push-ins are available.
To have, for example, a session where we had an EAPP teacher and a mainstream teacher who had really worked together and have them model for everybody else how the planning might play out and how it might actually play out in the classroom.
I wish that I had more time to meet with an EAPP teacher, so we've got time to meet. We need to try and use it as productively as possible. And one way that I think we could use it productively is if the classroom teacher is able to bring some resources that they're planning to use perhaps the following term to a meeting with an EAPP teacher. And then those resources and the way in which the new unit's going to be delivered can be discussed, and the EAPP teacher can make suggestions on potential changes or different ways of doing things, or changes in vocabulary if it's a worksheet or something like that. And then by working together on developing those resources and developing the teaching approach, the EAPP teacher understands the classroom teacher perhaps better. Classroom teacher gets the opportunity to look at delivering a unit from the perspective of an EAPP teacher, and at the end of the meeting hopefully there are some resources that can be used straight away or the following term. And then later, if that's happened, then perhaps the classroom teacher will feel more confident about producing EAPP friendly materials for a future unit or whatever, and maybe the EAPP teacher will feel more comfortable in that teacher's classroom because they know they've had some input in what's being delivered.
It's good for me because the teacher can help me about some homework or some I don't know some word or something.
I feel teacher is very helpful because like when we don't understand some question, we can ask them and the teacher can explain to us.
I feel more comfortable because it's when have essentially in math or other class is good for me because she helped me make something I can do.
Okay.
Yeah, I think good too because Ajahn Tiffany can help me a lot for make homework of math.
I think EAPP science and history is really help students to improve a lot because sometimes we have some vocabulary strange, so we need teacher to explain to us and help us to do homework. It's easier to learn.
I feel good because they can help me improve my English and also make me more understanding in that subject. Sometimes I feel awkward because they know when someone follow you, teach you and look at you all the time.
Did it help your learning?
Yes.
How?
If I don't know some question, they ask me explain, and then I can understand some word or some question. Then I can get more English skills.
They help me to learn by giving me a new word from math class or science. A new word I don't know.
And how essentially in math class helped me to improve my math because when I don't understand, I can ask her.
I think EAPP science and history is really help and it's to sometimes explain, the teacher explain to us the knowledge more.
Because they make me more understanding, I can ask them the question and they can check me.
At first, I think it's a little bit scared when I get out from EAPP science, but then I feel another challenge for me, and it's also Ajahn Tiffany can come and help us for studying too. So I think it's very good.
I feel sometimes weird because first term we work together and we have study together and next term we don't have each other. I have to study by myself, but I think I really improved.
I really want to go back to science EAPP class. It's really helped us.
They feel that, okay, we have another teacher that we can ask for help.
Okay.
Yeah?
Because they can ask more questions for any teacher, so it's good for us.
You are a nice teacher and I think they need you too.
I think it's good because it helps her friends to improve math and English, and because sometimes it's when her understand can ask you to.
My classmates really want to, I think they really want to go to EAPP science too because it's both can help us and other English strong persons because it's the teacher can repeat a lot of time knowledge and we can learn more and it's good for our study.
I think maybe they jealous because I have the teacher work with me and they help me to do my work, and I was finish homework faster more than my friends in class because they help me.
In the classes themselves, the EAPP students are fine. They're fine to work with. They're actually moving along really quickly, especially the new students. But sometimes in other classes, such as drama, it becomes hard to communicate with them. And when we have to do a presentation, sometimes they're a bit shy. But otherwise, there's not much difference. But sometimes it's kind of fun to help them and stuff. We know you're there. Sometimes we are actually helped by the teachers, but it doesn't really change anything whether we have one teacher or two teachers. It's not distracting or...
It's good to have a wide variety of students in each class. It shows that we're in a school.
Okay.
And I don't think it changes everything, like anything for anyone. Like it's the same. They get different tuition. They need more help, but like it doesn't change anything for us. And yeah,
okay.
If they need help, we can help them as well.
Okay. What's it like having two teachers in your classes?
Well, there's one teacher that doesn't really talk. She just helps, like, without talking. So doesn't
provide support for everyone. So yeah.
Okay.
Before the push and stuff a while ago, I mean, there was kind of like they were a bit behind, and it was like they weren't really learning. But I noticed like this year especially, they really started learning and stuff. And it's always good to have them, and they're talking as well. They're not quiet all the time.
Anastasia, χαίρομαι πολύ και είναι πολύ καλή κοπέλα εδώ πέρα. We work very well together. So